e4. Are we going to get e5, c5, d6, e6, f5, g5? We'll never know until they play. So we get e5, and we're just going to play this normally. Knight f3. So against knight c6, we're just going to play d3. And again, it's kind of funny that I originally thought g3 was going to be the right call, but I really should have realized that this d5 move is something to worry about if it happens soon. Oh, they made a move. Oh, my bad. I thought I played d3. Okay. Yeah, I'm just going insane. So now d3. And luckily, no matter what they play in the opening against the King's Indian attack, this is just something to mention. So if they play c6 or d5 or anything, we can generally play the same idea of trying to fianchetto our light square bishop. d5, we just want to take that, and then we will continue with g3 and bishop g2 with natural development. g3, bishop g2 next. I don't think there's anything to worry about of knight to d4. We can play bishop g2. And if they play bishop g4, really trying to exploit this pin on this rook, because right now there's actually a pin going on, if we notice that. In this position, actually, wait. If I go bishop g2 after knight d4, is there a problem? Can they go bishop h3? So let's calculate this just before I get into my other thought here. Knight d4, bishop g2. Okay, we don't have to worry. But knight d4, bishop g2, bishop h3. And if we take that, the knight takes d4, I think we're lost. So maybe here we have to... Oh, let's just get rid of some of those arrows. Maybe we just have to just be a little bit careful and play knight d2 first, which would avoid that. Let's castle. I feel extremely happy with my opening so far. I'm looking at moves like knight c3 or knight d2. Generally, we want to put the knight on d2 in these lines. It covers e4, it covers c4. Both of those are really good squares to jump to. It can jump to c3. The biggest problem with jumping to c3 with our knight is that it does block our c2 pawn, which maybe we want to move, maybe we don't, but it keeps things a little bit more flexible, I feel. So knight d2 is probably the most natural choice here. Knight takes d4 is actually possible, by the way, because after knight takes d4, their queen is attacked. So if they take on d1, we just take on d5. And if they take on c2, we can, of course, take on b7. But I don't know if that's necessary. I feel like the move knight d2 is more than enough to keep us afloat and keep the game going. So they do get a very active setup with their queen on d5, the knight on d4, bishop on c5 and everything, even knight coming to f6. But I don't think we're unhappy either. Because we do have a great bishop on the long diagonal. It is doing a great job defending our king. And development doesn't seem like it will be too much of a problem. But we'll have to see, won't we? I want to play some sort of h3, g4 to kick this bishop. But I don't want to do that before they castle. Because if they don't castle short, maybe they castle long and this h3, g4 just opens up my own king. So I want to maintain flexibility here. But can we? That's the good question. c3 also looks interesting. Knight takes d4, knight takes d4, but d3 becomes weak. I'm hesitant to play such a move. I do not like weaknesses. We should not like weaknesses. We don't want to play c3 without d4 being possible. There's actually a funny looking idea, which is c3. Okay, well, now we're not worrying about that anymore. Can we play knight takes d4? Maybe we don't have to. Maybe just knight b3 is better. Knight b3 looks really good. And I'm just trying to take on d4. I'm really happy about that. Generally, I think trades are going to be something we're happy about here. If they take on d4, I'll take back. They can take, and I can take on f3. And the problem that they're left with at the end of the day is that their bishop on c5 is hanging and their pawn on b7. So even though we lose our light squared bishop from a trade, we're not losing material. We're just exchanging it off. We do get something very concrete in the position as a reward, which is the fact that they will ultimately have to leave their b7 pawn to capture. So winning a pawn here would be really nice. Which is a pretty far in calculation, but I think it's hopefully understandable. I'm extremely happy about any sort of bishop h3s. They're just not really well timed. Actually, a move I'm looking at is bishop f4, which looks funny, but it is rook e1. And if we look at what's going on with their queen, actually, I think we can take on e5 now. I think we can take on e5. I think it's just a free pawn. Because the idea of bishop f4 is the same as knight takes e5. Knight takes e5 here, queen takes e5. There's rook e1 pinning the queen to the king and winning that piece. There's also knight g5, which I think is more accurate. This just wins the... Does it win everything? Okay, let's see. So knight g5, bishop g4, attacking my queen. If I were to take their queen, they can take mine, and then I can end up taking their bishop at the end. So we're just one move of tempos, okay? If they take on g2, we just happily take on e6. Calculation is key. Calculation is king. Woohoo. Woohoo. That's like the most unenthusiastic woohoo I've ever done. Woohoo. It's the Mario. What can I say? Yeah, so knight g5. And again, this one calculation of bishop g4 is very important. That it works out for us. Knight takes e6, bishop takes, and then knight takes at the very end there. Winning. And actually, it goes on further. Like if they take on c2, we can take on b7, give a check, and take on a7 as well. So it goes further. Goes further. We'll have to see what they play. They're thinking. And just as a recap, the reason why knight takes e5 isn't better is because they can take on g2 and just ignore this knight. They can just try to develop with a move like knight e7 and try to castle him. Whereas knight g5 is directly winning a piece by force. So when you see a good move, look for a better one. All right. Okay, so they actually went into this variation as mentioned. So this is the only way to try to maintain material. But after knight takes e6, this does not work. They will still end up losing a piece after knight takes e5 here. So they can take on c2. We'll just take on b7 and somehow on a7, either with a check in between or not. And their bishop's very unhappy if they take on c2. Because we can also just try to develop and attack the bishop, and it's just lost. The piece will just be lost. Yeah, so I kind of want to do that instead. Because, funnily enough, They do not have b6 because the rook hangs. So I'm just going to play bishop e3 and rook c1, and this bishop's lost. Great. Now rook to c1. Oh, they castled long. Interesting. I just realized that they can take on d3, but I don't know if that's good for them. What if I go here? Rook takes a7. Rook takes a7 is a direct mate threat if bishop takes b7 and rook a8. This looks very promising and might just end the game. I'm not wearing my glasses after the first few parts. I was before, but I don't know. Maybe I play worse with them. Maybe it's superstition. No, I don't know. There's a lot of glare that comes in from the camera. And yeah, now we get a mate, which is good. This was a fairly quick game. 17 mover. After king b8, rook a8, check. So that's awesome. We got a quick one in. Supposedly we made a mistake. And I'm not surprised, but I wonder if it's a mistake of being able to capitalize on something better or not. Let's find out. Queen takes d5, g3. That was the mistake. So g3, I should worry about bishop g4 and e4. Wow. Because if I take, they can take, and then knight d4 is a problem. Knight d2 and castle's long. And they get a huge initiative against me. There's no way to defend this piece because there's actually a pin going on the long file. I was about to say diagonal, but it's not a diagonal. The problem is if c3, knight takes f3, takes, and they can actually just take on f3 here because we can't take back. So a key move in this position, just to remember for next time, is we should probably throw in knight to c3 first. And after knight c3, now it feels like g3 is playable. Yes, this feels good. Because now the same move is not here. Bishop to g2. And we play our normal setup. The one question I think I will have is if... Ooh, nope, not g3. If knight c3, bishop to b4 is played, do we ignore it? Do we ignore it? If g3, what happens? Yep, we run into the same problem of... This time knight d4 is stronger. And the reason why is because we don't have knight d2. If bishop g2, there's bishop h3. Oh, this is equal. Okay, this is equal in this position. I was a little too fast. But bishop g4. And yeah, there's no... Oh, not bishop f5. Bishop g4. And there's not really a way to add another defender to the knight here. So just... It's good to learn all of these things ahead of time. Bishop d2 looks good. I like this. Bishop takes c3 is forced. If you move the queen away, then why do you play bishop b4? Then bishop might run into discoveries as well. And now it feels like we're not... we could go for g3 potentially. Unless bishop g4. If bishop g4, then we just go bishop e2, I think. And we can just castle. So, again, there's some times where we can't go into our King's Indian attack, but that's okay. That is okay. As long as we are not too stubborn and we're understanding some consequences here. So, a good consequence, again, is don't play g3 too willy-nilly like I did. And make sure you know the potential threats here. And bishop g4 is just a huge problem for us. Even bishop e2 is not fun. Because bishop e2, I think there's knight d4. Yeah, knight d4. And we can't take because they take on h1 first. Little piece of information for us. Good to know. The rest of the game felt pretty okay. I think we got a normal position after that. Knight takes d4 was playable here. I think I mentioned that, though. Knight d2 I was happier with. And queen e6 felt a little off. Knight takes d4 was better. I was looking at it. I just thought either rook e1 or knight... b3 was a bit more interesting. Computer doesn't hate the move though. Takes. And yeah, I'm not surprised that it's suggesting f6. This is kind of what I was expecting, or like would have expected of like a maybe 1800 to play. But totally natural to not play that. I was more kind of like knight f97 feels like the most natural move to play. But yeah. So bishop h3, and here again, computer just goes wild. So just as a recap, knight takes e5 is not as good. It's still good. It's still good. Don't get me wrong. But it's not as good here because they don't have to take on e5. If they take on e5, it's winning. Rook e1 just wins the game. But of course, they just ignore it with knight e7, and then they try to castle. And yeah, we still get an awesome position after d4. But, you know, why go for a winning a pawn when you can win a piece with knight g5? And that's actually what happened in the game with this knight takes e6 and knight takes e5. And that was the game. So, cool.